Miss Kate. I'm Woolly Faye. Welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use yarn balls for tapestry crochet. And I think it's important to note that there are different methods that you can use in tapestry crochet, but the success of each is largely dependent on the type of project that you're working with. Now, I am making this particular tutorial for people who are buying the PillowPaws pattern, which can be found in my Woolly Faye shop on Etsy or Ravelry. But if you are here just because you're interested in the technique or you want to learn a little more about tapestry crochet, then you're in the right place. This video is good for you as well. I do want to note that I will not be using the PillowPaws in this tutorial. You'll have to buy the pattern for that, but I will be working a swatch with a geometric design, and it's the exact same technique that you will use if you're trying to work this pattern. So with that said, let's just go ahead and get started. Before we begin, you want to gather your supplies. You're going to need 2 shades of yarn in whatever weight or fiber you have available to you. Now, I want to point out that when you're working a pattern, you want to stick to the pattern specifications. You don't want to veer from that. But in this tutorial, we're going to be learning how to make yarn balls. So it's going to be about the mechanics of it. So the weight and the fiber is not as critical, so just use whatever you have at your disposal. That will be fine. You're going to want an appropriately sized hook. I'm using light worsted DK yarn in a 100% acrylic and in an acrylic and wool blend, and I'm using a 4mm G hook with that. So you'll want to use the hook appropriate for the yarn size that you're using, the yarn weight. You're also going to want a pair of clippers you'll be fastening off at the end of every row. One thing that you don't need, but it's important to mention in case you decide to do your own project, is these stitch markers. The stitch markers help you keep track of where you need to make transitions. So for example, on this pattern, if you stick your stitch marker into that first stitch before that begins, then when you get to this point, you know that there's a transition. This will stop you from making errors in your work. But I also use it when I'm chaining. So I may chain 25, add a stitch marker, chain 25 more, add another stitch marker, and then I know that when I have 4 stitch markers, I've chained 100. It's just a way of making sure that your stitch count is correct. So if you want to do a large project, I highly recommend these. Now we're going to look at yarn balls. In this tutorial, we have a 13 row by 12 stitch swatch that we're going to do. We're going to chain 13, but we're going to lose a stitch, and you'll see how that works in just a moment. But for that reason, I'm just going to go ahead and just use the whole skein on the back. There's no reason to break it down into yarn balls. But in larger projects, you may need to scatter these yarn balls across. So let's just say that you wanted to do this section here with yarn balls. Then you would attach your yarn on the first stitch. You'd go ahead and work the number of stitches specified in the pattern. And then when you were finished, instead of clipping this off, you just leave it attached, let it hang down on the back side, and then pick it up again when you came back again on the next row. So you kind of want to wind these up to whatever size you think you're going to need. Now let's take a look at the graph. Now in a pattern, you'll get a computer generated graph. So I'll have built that into my program and then of course added it to the pattern. So it'll be a really nice professional looking graph. But for this tutorial, I have drawn it out and marked it just because it's a very short tutorial and a very small swatch, so it suffices. You're going to work from the first row at the bottom, so from bottom to top up to row 13 this way, and you're going to work across from the right to the left. You'll see that on row 1, when we go across, it's completely the gray. And then on row 2, completely gray. And it's not until we get to row 3 that we add the first yarn ball. And I should note to you that your foundation row, so you're going to do your foundation chain, your foundation row is going to be the first row. In any of my patterns, foundation row will always be row 1. So you're going to go ahead and chain 13. And then once you have your chain, I'll show you how you add those into the back bump, just in case you don't already know. Okay, so once you have your 13 chains, you can see that one side of your chain is fairly flat. When you turn it over on the other side, it's bumpy. So what you're going to be doing on this is you're going to be working into those back bumps. You can see them if I kind of turn it a bit here. So you're going to be working under those ridges on the back side. So you're going to skip this first bump, go over to the second, stick your hook up under that one. It'll be the second from the hook. And now you're just going to do a single crochet under each one of those bumps. Because we're working front side only tapestry, we have to fasten off. So the way you do that is you chain 2, you take your clippers, clip that off, raise your hook straight up, release that. You're going to grab that tail right here, and then you're going to take your fingers and pinch over the top of those 2 chains you made and just slide down, okay? Now that is going to be a very tight knot. And so you always want to check your work before you do that, because before you fasten off, because if you don't and you've made a mistake, the only way you can remedy it is to clip that knot, pull that row out, and do it over. So it's very important to always check that work. Now, we're going to be working on the same side, so we're going to be moving just over all the way to the right side again without turning the work, because we're doing front side only. So when you do that, if you have to set it down for any reason, you might just want to take a note here that the back side kind of has a thick texture to it. And then on the front side, it's flatter, but you're going to have that ridge from putting it into the back bump and leaving the front loops available. And we're going to begin the next row, same side. You're going to insert your hook under both loops of that first stitch. And this is very important. You always work into the back loop with front side tapestry. If you don't, then you're going to end up with sides that lean like this at an angle. I call it a leaning box effect, because this will be straight here and there's no way to correct that. So when you stick those under both loops, you won't notice it until you've probably done anywhere from 10, 15, even 20 rows. You start to realize that the whole thing is leaning. And that can just be really upsetting, because you've done all that work and you have to start over. Well, you can avoid it if you just remember that on the first stitch, you work under both loops. On the final stitch, you work under both loops, but every other stitch goes into the back loop. No exceptions. Okay, and that will keep your work straight. You're going to add your color under both loops again right here. So what I do to attach it is to pull that loop through. So I just yarn over and pull up a loop. Then I chain 1. I'm going to stick my finger over the top of that loop on my hook. I'm going to insert my hook under both loops for the first stitch. I'm going to pull up another loop, and then I'm going to pull through 2. Now, we're just going to work in the back loop all the way down, back loop only. So we're doing back loop single crochets until we get to the final stitch. So I've done that final single crochet stitch under both loops. To fasten off, I chain 2. I clip my yarn. I pull that up, grab a hold of one end, And then right above those chains, I slide it down, okay? Remember, that's going to be very tight. So you want to always make sure that your work is correct. So now we're going to start the third row. And on the third row, this is where we add the yarn balls. So we're going to work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if I was using stitch markers, I would stick my stitch marker on that 8th stitch. Now, of course, this is a small swatch, so that's not necessary. This is where we're going to begin the yarn balls, right here, and we will leave them attached for the duration. So again, we're going to start with our color A, or our gray, under both loops, right here, and the rest will be back loop only. Pull up a loop, chain 1, and then insert our hook back in there, and I just kind of put my finger over that loop and do a single crochet. Okay, and I just give it a slight tug. Okay, so that's 1. Where you add the yarn is always 1. So now we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so when we get to the 6th stitch, we're not going to complete it. We're going to add our red, or color B, when we get right here, when we get to the 6th stitch. So we begin it with the 7th stitch, but okay, we're going to add our red when we get to the 7th stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've started the 7th stitch. Okay, we take our yarn and we finish that stitch. I just pin it to the back. Okay, I pull the loop through to finish the stitch. So I've started the final stitch with the appropriate color right here with the gray, and then I finish it with the stitch. So that's going to be the 8th stitch, but I'm actually finishing the 7th stitch with it. So I've pulled that through, I've got the loop, and if you notice, I pull this to the side, it does not change the 7th stitch color. All right? So now I'm just going to go into, and we've only got 1, okay? I'm going to go into the back loop of that, and I'm just kind of holding on to all this. And I have actually gone up under this gray one and caught it up in there too to cover it. You're going to want to do that because you're going to want to go ahead and move this gray along as you go. So now I'm not going to complete this stitch because our next stitch is gray. So stitch number 8, we finished stitch number 7 with the red. We started stitch number 8 with red. It will remain red, but we're going to finish it with gray. Okay. Now, I've got my yarn off to the side here because I don't want it in the way, but I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to clip it off. I'm going to leave it there. I am going to cover it 1 time. So I'm going to insert my hook under the back loop of the gray, and I'm going to move that tail out of the way, and I'm going to cover, not the tail, but the yarn that we're using, 1 time, and then I'm not going to cover it anymore. I'm going to leave it hanging behind here. All right, now, because this is going to be on the underside of our pillow, I'm just going to clip it off. If you wanted to cover it the rest of the way down, you could, but that kind of defeats the point of it. All right, so now you're just going to finish the row with your gray, and you're going to be sure that you're not covering this red. You're going to leave it hanging. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. We've just done 2. So here's number 3. And then on the 4th stitch, which is the final stitch, we work under both loops. Finish that single crochet. And then we're going to chain 2. Now you notice I didn't clip off this red. I've just left it in place. All right. So we're going to start the row number 4. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to attach number 1 and do 5 more. So I pull the loop up, chain 1, put my finger over that, and then I just do a single crochet in the very same stitch. Now, back loop only, I do 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, and when we do the 5th stitch, we don't finish it because we're going to finish it with our red, with our color B. So I insert my hook into the back loop, I pull up a loop, I have 2 loops on the hook. This is a single crochet stitch, but you're going to move your yarn up in front like this and pin it with your thumb. Okay? And then you're going to take your other color, you have to kind of sift those out of the way. Take your other color and draw it up and pull it through the loop. Now, you don't want to draw it up so tight that it bends the fabric. You want it to be smooth, and you're going to end up covering that. And you're going to be covering this gray as well. So you're going to cover the red and you're going to cover the gray. So you insert your hook up under the back loop. You make sure that it goes under both the gray that you're using and the red that you pulled across. You want to make sure, again, that that red is not real tight. You just need to make sure that it's a nice tension on there. You can adjust it before you make your next stitch. So you're going to insert your hook into the back loop, pull up a loop, complete the single crochet, and you look here, we've got 3 of those. 1, 2, 3. So go ahead, complete the next stitch, number 2, and it's going into the red that you did before. You're still covering this gray and the loop that you drew across. And then on the 3rd stitch, you're going to start but not finish. Okay? Pull that up, and then on the red, I just pull this to the side, so we don't really want that coming to the front. And we're going to take our gray, our color A, and we're going to pull it through both of those loops and finish the stitch with the gray. Now, I'm going to cover that red 1 time. Then I'm going to drop it and complete the stitch with my gray without covering it again. And then I'm going to finish. Now remember, we only had 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's 1. And now we're going to do the 2nd stitch. And then the third will go under both loops. Now this will look a lot nicer on a full-size pattern, but the whole point here is to teach you how, okay? So then you're going to chain 2 to fasten off, clip it, and pull it up. Okay, you don't want to clip off your red. You want to leave that one alone. So I just like to trim up this fringe a little bit as I go. Just keep it from getting in the way. So once again, we begin on row 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. That first one will be where we attach. Then we're going to do 2 red, 1 gray, 2 red. We're going to add our color A to the first stitch, going under both loops. Again, we're going to pull up a loop, chain 1, stick our finger over that loop, and do a single crochet into the same stitch. Okay, so now we're going to do 5, so we're going to do 4 more. 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th one we do not finish. Instead, we bring our yarn over. I'm not grabbing that tail. You could have buried that tail if you really wanted to. Now you see how that's a little bit tight there? So what you want to do then is kind of give it a little bit of a tug. You don't want it sloppy loose, but you want a real nice tension there on it. It's not too tight, not too loose. And then you're going to, you have to fiddle a little, make sure that that gray isn't pulled out too much. Now you're going to cover this red that you pulled across and the gray, because you want it to be on the other side of the red when you're ready to change colors. So insert your hook into that stitch. Make sure that those are both over the hook, and voila, there's your first stitch. And we do 2. Now we're going to switch back to gray. So I'm going to pull this red forward this time. Go ahead, do the gray, finish that second stitch with the gray. I'm going to pull this back over here. I'm going to insert my hook into the next red stitch, and I'm not going to complete it because I'm going to switch back to red now. So every time you switch to a new color, you finish the previous stitch with the new color. So I'm going to pull the red up, finish that stitch, go, and then I'm going to do 2 more. And I'm going to keep this gray on the back side and cover it. So that's 1. And I'm not going to finish the second stitch because we're going to be switching back to gray. Now I insert my hook into the next stitch and I cover red 1 time. Now I'm going to pull that red out of the way. I only have 2 gray stitches, so we're going to work under both loops and fasten off. Okay, and just be sure you keep that red out of the way. Now it's kind of gotten tangled up, so you may have to pull it out a bit. Normally you would sift them in a large project from side to side, but in this case you would actually have the yarn hanging off down the back, so you just go ahead and move it out of the way. It's just that I have it falling on the floor right now to keep it off the desk. Okay. So I complete that final stitch under both loops and I fasten off. All right. Once again, insert the hook under both loops and attach your yarn. And on this one, we are now going to have 1, 2, 3. This is row 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the first one will be where we attach it. We'll do 4 more full stitches. On the 5th stitch, we'll start it, but we won't finish. We'll add our red yarn. Okay. Here we are. We're going to cover that first one. So we're going into the red with the gray. Pull it up. Now the next one will be red. So we're moving back inward. We finished that with this red. And again, I'm just moving it all the way over. See how that kind of bends up a bit? So I'm just going to give it slightest tug, not a lot, but a little, to make sure that it's not going to pull. And then I'm going to pull that gray down a bit and do 3 reds. And into the gray stitch that we did before. And then red again. Remember, we're covering not only the loop we pulled across, but the gray as well. Now on that 3rd stitch, we want to go ahead and switch over to the gray. Pull this back. Go ahead and finish that. There should be 3 stitches there. 1, 2, 3. So that's the first one. And then we don't cover the red on the second and the final 2 stitches. You only cover the red on 1 stitch after you use it. And just a second here, let me finish this and I'll kind of explain that to you. So, there we go. So the next row we're doing is row 7. As you can see, these 2 are lined up together. So we'll do 1 here and 1 here. So we're going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first stitch is going to be where we add it. So that's going to be 1. We're attaching our yarn on the first stitch. We're going to do 3 more. So we're going to do 2, 1, 2. And on the 4th one, we start, but we don't finish. So you could add a second yarn ball here if you wanted. Could have done that in another color if we wanted. But I'm just going to pull that across. Now that does seem a little loose this time, doesn't it? So what we want to do is kind of give it a tug that way. So we're just going to go into the next stitch. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4. The next stitch we do red, but we're not going to finish it. Instead, we're going to go directly back to gray. And then we're going to do 2 grays. So here's 1. And I'm going ahead and covering the red this time. Here's 2. And I'm going over that loop as well in the back, and I'm covering this. Now I'm going to go back to red. So I complete that gray stitch with the red. And then we do 1 red into this stitch. We don't complete it because we're going back to the gray. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll end on that final one. So I'm going to cover that first one. I'm going into that red stitch there, okay, from the previous row. And I'm covering that loop as well. I'm going to drop this. I'm not going to cover it anymore. And I'm going to do the last 3 stitches. And you notice in the back here, I am moving this out of the way, but you notice we got that loop there still from where we pulled it over. So go ahead and catch those if you can. So there's 1, 2, and then the third one, we go under both loops. Okay. And now we're starting this one. So we won't actually be working with this anymore. We finished that proportion of it. And we've still got our yarn hanging off the back side. So let's go to row 8. 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3 gray, 3 red, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gray. So color A, we attach the yarn, we go under both loops. I had 3, so I have 2 more to do. And you know the third one, I'm going to switch 1. So that's a total of 3. I know I'm counting 1, 2, but I had 2 more after I attached. Okay, so I'm going to add the new yarn. It's all the way over here, okay? So if you want to clip it off, you can, but I will go ahead because on the PillowPaws, it's going to be concealed, okay? Ready? So there it is. And make sure it's not too tight, but I don't want it loose. Just a nice tension for it. And then I am going to do 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 1, whoops, 2, and on the third one, we don't finish with the red, we finish with the gray. So I'm going to pull that forward, grab that, give it a little bit of a tug, not much. Don't want to turn it into a drawstring. And now from here on out, we're going to cover it 1 time. Just go all the way to the end now. Number 9, we add to the first one. We do the second, but we don't finish it. We do 2. We're just repeating what we did down here. So it's the second one, and we don't finish it. We add our red, pull it across. Remember, we're going to cover that with our yarn. We don't want it too tight. We're going to go 2, 1, complete that first one, and then on the second, we complete with the gray, color gray. Now we do a stitch. The next stitch is gray. Make sure we get it right. And we don't complete it with gray because we switch directly back to the red, which is color B. We're going to do 2 color B, so we complete the first one. And then on the second one, we don't complete it. Pull this forward. There we go. Complete that with gray. And I'm going to show you now what I was talking about on the other, right? And I'm going to go ahead and cover this one and finish the row and move that yarn out of the way so we don't continue to cover it. I'm going to go ahead and complete the row with color A, which is gray. So fasten off with this. So now we're on row 10. 1, 2, 3. We only have 13, so we're getting close. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then of course we finish out with 6. 1. Okay. We're going to go into the back side here. Now we're going to actually be working 3, so we'll be working the 3rd stitch into the red. Right. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and then we complete that with the gray. And then I'm going to cover this one time, going into the red. Take that, pull it behind there. I'm completing this row. And then now we are on row 11. This will be our last yarn ball. And as again, if you were using these, you'd have this ball hanging off the back side like that. So we add our color A. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1. And then we finish off with the color A or gray. So 2, 3. Okay, and on the 4th one, we start it, but we don't finish. Pull the yarn over. This will be our last one. Okay. Insert the hook in under both the gray and the red. We don't complete it. Finish it with the gray. I cover it one time and then pull this back and stitch the rest without carrying the red. And that completes the yarn balls. You can carry this all the way across, but like I said, it does on a larger project kind of defeat the purpose. You can also carry the tails under it and bury the tails. But if you have a big contrast in colors, that can show through. So that's up to you, but you can bury those tails if you so choose. So let's go ahead if you want. For 12 and 13, you're basically just going to seal it off with a back loop single crochet. So you're just going to go all the way across. Now, if you want to bury that tail, for any of you who are still watching, you would just pull that yarn over the top. That's how you would bury it. And then just continue to bury it all the way down. And just keep that pin to the back side. You don't want it showing through on the front. So I think you get the gist of it all. We could go ahead and do row 13. We're not going to today. As you can see, it's on the graph, but it would just be a repeat of this row. And here is the PillowPaws. There is no bleeding through on this because we used yarn balls. And on the back side, in case you're interested, we've used the mosaic crochet, but with this pattern you can use 2 sides mosaic, or you can use both sides of PillowPaws. You can mix it up. So it's a very good pattern to buy, but if you were here just to learn the tutorial, that's okay as well. Please share or subscribe or give me a thumbs up because that helps me.